Greetings, and welcome to a journey into the ancient world where the gods reigned supreme and their wrath was legendary. Tonight, we're not just talking about myths. We're delving into the chilling realities of divine punishment, far beyond a simple bad hair day or a misplaced chariot. This is where pride met its agonizing fall, where defiance led to eternal torment, and where a god's bad mood could literally chain you to a rock for eternity. You find yourself standing on the precipice of Mount Olympus, though perhaps it's more accurate to say you're hovering just outside the celestial gates. Because let's be honest, actual mortals aren't exactly welcome guests in the gods' private lounge. From this vantage point, you can glimpse the dazzling, terrifying world of the Greek pantheon, a realm where power is absolute, emotions are magnified, and a slighted deity holds a grudge longer than a mortal holds onto a particularly stubborn splinter. It's a world that Hollywood, with its sparkling heroes and neatly resolved plots, often gets wildly, hilariously wrong. Forget the notion of a benevolent, understanding deity. The Greek gods are less like kindly grandparents and more like ridiculously powerful, eternally bored teenagers with a penchant for drama and an aversion to anything that doesn't go exactly their way. Their justice is a concept as fluid and unpredictable as a river after a particularly enthusiastic thunderstorm. One moment, Zeus might be a charming host, sharing ambrosia and witty banter. The next, he's turning someone into a cow, cursing a lineage, or devising a torment so exquisitely cruel it makes your teeth ache just thinking about it. And why? Sometimes for a legitimate transgression, like stealing divine fire or challenging their authority. But just as often, it's for something as trivial as an accidental glance, a boastful remark, or simply because they felt like it. Imagine living in a world where the cosmic equivalent of a playground bully also has lightning bolts and a pet kraken. That's essentially the Greek divine experience. There's no appeal process, no celestial court of human rights, and certainly no form you can fill out to complain about your eternal suffering. Their caprice is your fate. So, when we talk about the worst punishments in Greek mythology, understand that it's not always about deserving it in the human sense. It's about a delicate balance of power, a fragile cosmic ego, and the terrifying reality that one wrong move, one whispered slight, or one moment of forgetfulness could land you in an eternity of agony. It's like stepping into a room full of highly caffeinated, incredibly attractive, and terminally insecure beings who also happen to control the very fabric of reality. You walk on eggshells, you compliment their hair, and you definitely don't ever try to outsmart them. Because when a god decides you need a lesson, that lesson tends to last a very, very long time, often involving very creative uses of pain and futility. And perhaps the most terrifying part, they often don't even break a sweat thinking it up. It's just another Tuesday for them, a casual bit of divine interior decorating, if you will, with your soul as the canvas. You, a mere mortal, are nothing more than a cautionary tale waiting to be told, a living sculpture of suffering to remind everyone else to fall in line. From the torment of eternal hunger and thirst, you are now whisked away to another desolate corner of the underworld, where the air is thick with the sound of groaning effort and the endless scrape of stone on stone. Here, amongst the wailing shades and the murky rivers, you witness a figure you might recognize from whispered tales. Tantalus. He was once a king, a favorite of the gods, even allowed to dine at their table. But like many who get too close to divinity, Tantalus grew arrogant, perhaps a little too comfortable with his privileged access. He stole ambrosia, the gods' sacred food, and nectar, their divine drink, attempting to share these immortal delicacies with mere mortals, as if they were a casual party favor. Worse still, he once tried to trick the gods into eating his own son, Pelops, whom he had cruelly chopped into a stew to test their omniscience. It was a betrayal so profound, so utterly disrespectful, that even the perpetually squabbling Olympians united in their disgust. His punishment, therefore, was meticulously crafted to reflect his crimes, a truly agonizing poetic justice. You see Tantalus now, standing in a shimmering pool of water that reaches to his chin. His eyes, wide with desperate thirst, gaze at the cool, clear liquid. He bends his head to drink, his lips almost touching the surface, but just as he does, the water recedes, shrinking away as if alive, leaving only parched earth and mockery. It's a cruel, endless tease, a promise of relief that never materializes. It's like being perpetually just a single step away from scratching that itch you can't quite reach, but for all of eternity. Above him, laden branches hang heavy with ripe, succulent fruits, grapes, figs, apples, all plump and ready for the plucking. His stomach, you can almost hear it rumble with hunger, a gnawing emptiness that never ceases. He reaches out, his fingers trembling with anticipation, but just as his hand closes around a branch, a sudden gust of wind, a phantom breeze, whips through the air, lifting the branches just out of his grasp. The fruit sways tantalizingly, just out of reach, forever mocking his starvation. It's a culinary torture, a banquet always prepared but never consumed. Imagine being at the most exquisite feast, but every time you lift your fork, the food jumps off the plate and hides. Only, this isn't just one meal, it's every meal, forever. And if the physical torment weren't enough, there's a constant, chilling dread that hovers above him. A massive stone, perpetually poised to fall, hangs precariously over his head, threatening to crush him at any moment. It never falls, of course, but the terror, the anticipation of oblivion, is its own form of agony. It's the ultimate anxiety dream, but you can't wake up from it. This wasn't just about pain, it was about futility, the stripping away of hope, the ultimate mockery of his once privileged state. The gods, in their infinite wisdom and infinite cruelty, understood that the greatest torment wasn't just physical discomfort, but the endless, unfulfilled promise of relief. Tantalus, eternally hungry and thirsty, with the sword of Damocles, or rather, the rock of Zeus hanging above him, serves as a timeless warning. Even the gods' dinner invitations come with a very, very strict RSVP policy, and under no circumstances should you ever try to serve them their own children for supper. Some things are just bad manners. From the relentless futility of Sisyphus behind, you are now whisked away to another desolate corner of the underworld, where the air is thick with the sound of groaning effort and the endless scrape of stone on stone. Here, you witness the plight of Sisyphus, a figure whose name has become synonymous with futile labor. Sisyphus was not a god, nor a titan, but a mortal king of Corinth, known for his cunning, his deceit, and his audacious attempts to cheat death itself. He was, to put it mildly, a bit of a scoundrel. He betrayed secrets of the gods, imprisoned Thanatos, death himself, and even managed to wring his way back from the underworld after being sent there the first time, all through sheer trickery and a silver tongue. Naturally, such blatant disrespect for the natural order, and particularly for Hades' domain, did not go unpunished. The gods, weary of his antics and his constant flouting of their authority, decided to craft a punishment that perfectly matched his character, one of relentless, soul-crushing pointlessness. You watch as Sisyphus, a figure of muscle and sinew, strains against a massive boulder. It is larger than he is, rough and unyielding, and he pushes it with every fiber of his being up a steep, seemingly endless hill. His brow is furrowed with effort, sweat glistens on his skin, and his breath comes in ragged gasps. He grunts, he heaves, he struggles, his feet slipping on the loose scree. Every inch gained is a testament to his sheer, stubborn will. He is almost at the top, just a few more feet, a final desperate push, and you can almost feel the surge of fleeting hope that must course through him in those moments. But then, just as he reaches the summit, just as the possibility of success flickers in his eyes, the boulder, with a cruel, mocking rumble, begins to roll backward. It gains momentum, tumbling down the slope faster and faster, until it crashes to the bottom, coming to rest precisely where it began. And Sisyphus, he has no choice but to follow. His shoulders slump, his body aches, but he descends the hill, his gaze fixed on the immovable stone. He reaches the bottom, and without a word, Without a moment's rest, he begins his ascent once more, pushing the same boulder, destined to repeat the same futile action for all eternity. It's a torment that transcends physical pain, though he must surely be exhausted beyond measure. It's the torture of knowing, with absolute certainty, that your most strenuous efforts will always lead to nothing. It's like spending your entire life trying to organize a pile of socks, only for them to magically randomize themselves the moment you finish. Or perhaps trying to build a sandcastle while the tide is perpetually, aggressively coming in. And the truly ingenious part of this punishment is that it hinges on Sisyphus's own relentless, cunning nature. He could stop, theoretically. He could lie down and give up, but the gods knew his pride, his defiant spirit, would never allow it. He is condemned not just by the boulder, but by his own refusal to surrender, his own endless, futile hope that this time might be different. The gods, it seems, understood that sometimes the most exquisite torture isn't about what they do to you, but what they force you to do to yourself. And so, Sisyphus pushes on, a silent, straining testament to the dangers of trying to outwit those who write the rules of existence. Leaving the relentless futility of Sisyphus behind, you are now transported to a desolate, wind-swept peak in the Caucasus Mountains, a place of stark rock and endless sky. Here, amidst the biting cold and the cries of distant eagles, you witness the agonizing punishment of Prometheus, a titan whose name means forethinker, and who dared to challenge the absolute authority of Zeus. Prometheus was not just any titan, he was a benefactor of humankind, a rebel with a cause who saw the plight of early mortals struggling in ignorance and cold, and felt a profound pity for them. Zeus, in his infinite wisdom and even more infinite ego, had decided to keep fire from humanity, perhaps to assert divine dominance, or simply because he preferred mortals to shiver in the dark. Prometheus, however, could not stand by. In an act of profound compassion and audacious defiance, he stole fire from the gods, some say from the forge of Hephaestus, others from the very chariot of Helios, and delivered it to humanity. This single act sparked civilization, allowing mortals to cook, to forge tools, to warm themselves against the cold, and to ultimately begin their ascent from a brutish existence. It was, arguably, the greatest gift ever given to humanity by a divine being. But to Zeus, it was the ultimate betrayal, an unforgivable usurpation of his power and a direct challenge to his decree. The king of the gods, known for his thunderous rage and his rather creative methods of vengeance, devised a punishment for Prometheus that was designed to be both eternal and excruciatingly painful. You see him now chained to the jagged rock face, his limbs stretched taut, his body exposed to the elements. The chains, forged by Hephaestus himself, are unbreakable, binding him to this desolate prison for eternity. There is no escape, no possibility of relief. And then the truly horrifying part of his daily torment begins. With a shadow passing overhead, a colossal eagle, a monstrous bird of prey, descends from the sky. This is no ordinary eagle, it is a creature sent by Zeus himself, a living instrument of divine retribution. The eagle lands on Prometheus's chest and proceeds to tear at his flesh, devouring his liver. Imagine the searing pain, the tearing, the gnawing agony as the bird feasts upon his vital organ. It's a grotesque, intimate violation, a slow, agonizing death repeated day after day. But this isn't a single event. Each night, as darkness falls, Prometheus's divine liver regenerates, making him whole again, only for the eagle to return with the dawn and repeat the torment. This cycle of healing and torment is endless, a perpetual loop of suffering with no hope of reprieve. It is the perfect blend of physical agony and psychological despair, a reminder that even the most benevolent actions can incur the most terrible wrath when they challenge supreme power. And so, Prometheus remains a silent, suffering monument to defiance, his agony echoing across the mountains, a chilling warning to anyone who dares to question the will of Olympus. From the brutal, regenerating agony of Prometheus, you are now thrown into a scene of chaotic, fiery motion, where a single figure whirls in perpetual torment. This is Ixion, a king of the Lapiths, whose story is a stark reminder that even the most heinous mortal crimes can provoke a divine wrath beyond imagining. Ixion was, to put it mildly, not a good person. He committed the unthinkable crime of murdering his father-in-law by pushing him into a pit of burning coals. A truly charming individual, you might agree. But despite this rather significant transgression, Zeus, in a baffling display of divine leniency, or perhaps just extreme boredom, actually purified Ixion of his bloody deed and invited him to dine on Mount Olympus. Now, any sensible mortal, having narrowly escaped eternal damnation and been invited to the gods' exclusive celestial party, would probably keep their head down, thank their lucky stars, and politely sip their ambrosia. But Ixion, it seems, was not sensible. Instead, he made the colossal mistake of attempting to seduce Hera, Zeus's notoriously jealous and powerful wife. It was a move so audacious, so utterly foolhardy, that it borders on comedic. Hera, as one might expect, did not take kindly to this blatant disrespect. Zeus, ever the master of elaborate and deeply ironic punishments, decided to teach Ixion a lesson that would echo through eternity. He created a cloud phantom, an ethereal replica of Hera, to test Ixion's intentions. When Ixion, in his lustful delusion, embraced the cloud, he sealed his fate. Zeus then proclaimed his terrible judgment. You see Ixion now, eternally bound to a fiery, winged wheel. It's not just spinning, it's ablaze, a perpetual inferno of torment. The wheel itself is a thing of horror, spokes of pure flame, its rotation never ceasing. Ixion is spread-eagled across it, his limbs stretched and tied, his body perpetually consumed by the flames, but never quite reduced to ash. Imagine the searing heat, the unimaginable pain of being constantly burned alive, yet unable to die, unable to even faint into merciful unconsciousness. And it's not just stationary. The wheel spins, hurtling him through the air, perhaps through the very depths of Tartarus. A constant, dizzying, nauseating ride into oblivion that never quite arrives. It's like being stuck on the most terrifying, broken carnival ride in existence. Only the tickets are paid for with your eternal soul. And there's no height restriction because, well, you're already dead. The punishment of Ixion serves multiple purposes. It is a brutal condemnation of treachery and ingratitude against the gods who showed him mercy. It is a stark warning against hubris and lust, especially when directed at the Queen of Olympus. And perhaps most importantly, it's a very public, very painful demonstration of Zeus's unwavering authority and his formidable capacity for vengeance. You can almost hear the implicit message. This is what happens when you cross me, and this is what happens when you try to flirt with my wife. So Ixion remains a blazing, screaming testament to divine wrath, his fiery wheel turning forever, a permanent monument to a very bad life choice. From the maddening, leaky jars of the Danaides, you are now transported to a darker, more somber part of the underworld, a place where endless effort is met only with endless futility. Here you encounter the Danaides, a group of 50 sisters whose collective punishment is a stark portrayal of fruitless labor. Their story begins with a truly dreadful wedding night, or rather, 49 dreadful wedding nights. Danaides, the king of Argos, had 50 daughters, the Danaides, and his brother Aegyptus had 50 sons. A forced marriage was arranged between the cousins. Danaides, fearing a prophecy that his sons-in-law would kill him, ordered his daughters to murder their husbands on their wedding night. 49 of the sisters obeyed, brutally slaying their new spouses in their sleep. Only one, Hypermnestra, defied her father, sparing her husband Lynceus because he respected her wish to remain a virgin. This act of disobedience, however merciful to her husband, did not endear the other Danaides to the gods of the underworld, especially considering the mass murder they committed. For their horrific crime, and particularly for their unified act of treachery and disrespect for the sanctity of marriage and life, the 49 murderous Danaides were condemned to an eternity of soul-crushing, pointless labor in Tartarus. You see them now, a line of weary, perpetually struggling women, each holding a large, ornate jar. Their faces are etched with exhaustion, their movements slow and repetitive, yet they never stop. They are at the edge of a vast pool, or perhaps a river of dark, murky water. With solemn, practiced movements, they dip their jars into the water, carefully filling them to the brim. The water, it seems, is their sole focus, their only task. Then, with great effort, they turn and trudge towards a massive, bottomless vessel, a communal tub or cistern that seems to stretch into the dark, echoing cavern. They reach the vessel, tilt their jars, and pour in the water. But as the water leaves their jars, you notice the flaw in their eternal punishment. The communal vessel is riddled with holes. Small cracks, gaping fissures, or perhaps simply a mythical bottom that is designed to leak as fast as it is filled. The water, which they have so painstakingly carried, streams out of the bottom of the vessel as quickly as it is poured in. It's a cruel, endless cycle. The Danaides return to the pool, fill their jars once more, carry them back, and pour the water into the sieve-like vessel, only for it to drain away instantly. Their task is never completed, their goal never achieved, their thirst never quenched if it's also a torment for themselves. Imagine trying to dry up a lake with a colander, or attempting to fill a bucket that has more holes than actual surface. This is their eternity. The psychological torture of this punishment is profound. It's the constant anticipation of completion, immediately followed by the crushing realization of failure. It's the ultimate mockery of effort, a profound statement on the futility of trying to escape divine judgment through endless, meaningless toil. The gods, in their twisted wisdom, understood that a task that is never finished, a labor that never yields results, is a far more insidious torment than simple physical pain. And so, the Danaides continue their work, a silent, perpetually frustrated chorus of pointless endeavor, a watery testament to the consequences of bloodshed and defiance in the ancient world. From the maddening, leaky jars of the Danaides, you are now whisked away to a scene of former opulence, bathed in a strange, shimmering light. Here, you encounter King Midas, a figure whose story begins with a seemingly benevolent wish and ends with a chilling lesson about the true cost of unchecked desire. Midas was a wealthy king of Phrygia, known for his lavish lifestyle and perhaps a touch too much love for gold. His punishment isn't a direct act of divine wrath in the same vein as those before him, but rather a tragic consequence of a poorly considered blessing, turning into a profound curse. The tale begins when Midas, through an act of hospitality, helped the satyr Silenus, a companion of Dionysus, the god of wine. Grateful, Dionysus offered Midas any wish he desired. Now, a wise man might have wished for wisdom or happiness, or perhaps a perpetually full wine cellar. But Midas, blinded by his avarice, wished for the ability to turn everything he touched into gold. And Dionysus, with a sly smile that likely held a hint of amusement and a touch of foreknowledge, granted the wish. At first, Midas was ecstatic. You can almost see him now, laughing with delight, touching a rose and watching it transform into a gleaming, solid bloom of metal. He touches a stone, and it becomes a heavy nugget. His bed, his furniture, everything around him shimmers with the new, coveted hue. He truly believed he had achieved the ultimate form of wealth, boundless riches with a mere touch. Imagine the sheer glee of suddenly having the power to instantly manifest wealth with a simple touch. It must have felt like absolute, undeniable triumph, but the joy quickly soared, curdling into a bitter, agonizing realization. He tries to eat a piece of bread, and it turns into a golden, inedible lump in his hands. He lifts a goblet of wine to his lips, and it solidifies into liquid gold before he can drink. The feast he had prepared for himself, now a glittering tableau of inedible masterpieces. Every bite, every sip, every basic necessity of life transforms into the very thing he desired most, yet which now threatens to starve him. His wish had become a cruel, ironic cage. And then the true horror sets in. His beloved daughter, sensing his distress, rushes to comfort him. He embraces her, and in a heart-wrenching instant, she too transforms into a cold, golden statue, her warm flesh turned to unfeeling metal. This is the true punishment, not the gold itself. But the isolation, the starvation, and the unbearable grief of turning all he held dear into lifeless, glittering idols. He cannot eat, he cannot drink, he cannot embrace, he cannot love without destroying the very essence of what makes life meaningful. Desperate and starving, Midas eventually pleaded with Dionysus to reverse the curse. The god, perhaps having had his fill of the tragic irony, instructed Midas to wash himself in the river Pactolus. Midas did so, and the golden touch flowed out of him and into the river, which thereafter carried golden sands. Midas was freed from his curse, but the lesson, a brutal and unforgettable one, remained: be careful what you wish for, especially when dealing with gods who enjoy a good, ironic twist. For King Midas, gold was not a blessing, but a gilded cage, a shimmering prison of his own making, forever reminding him of the true cost of unchecked greed. From Medusa's golden despair, you are now transported to a scene of artistic triumph turned tragic downfall, where the silent hum of a loom gives way to the frantic scuttling of a creature. Here, you encounter Arachne, a mortal weaver whose incredible skill became her undoing, a cautionary tale about the perils of hubris when dealing with the easily offended gods. Arachne was a maiden from Lydia, renowned throughout her land and beyond for her unparalleled talent in weaving and embroidery. Her tapestries were so exquisite, so vibrant and lifelike, that it was said nymphs would abandon their groves and mortals would halt their journeys just to marvel at her artistry. Her skill was so profound, in fact, that people began to whisper that she must have been taught by Athena herself, the goddess of wisdom, crafts, and warfare. Athena was, among many other things, the divine patroness of weaving. Instead of accepting this as a compliment, or perhaps offering a humble prayer to the goddess, Arachne scoffed at the idea. She declared that she owed no debt to Athena, that her skill was entirely her own, and in a truly audacious display of mortal arrogance, she boldly challenged Athena to a weaving contest. Now imagine the sheer audacity of this, a mere mortal with threads and a loom, daring to challenge an Olympian goddess who literally invented the craft. It's like a baker challenging the sun to a souffle contest, or a fish challenging the ocean to a swimming race. It just doesn't end well. Athena, ever the proud and competitive deity, could not let such a blatant challenge to her authority go unanswered. Disguising herself as an old woman, she visited Arachne, kindly advising her to retract her challenge and seek forgiveness for her boastful words. But Arachne, brimming with confidence and perhaps a touch of youthful stubbornness, scorned the old woman's advice, reasserting her belief that she was superior to the goddess. At this point, Athena dropped her disguise, revealing herself in all her divine glory. The contest began. Both weavers set to their looms, their fingers flying, creating masterpieces of astonishing beauty. Athena wove a tapestry depicting the majestic power of the gods, showing scenes of their triumphs over mortals who dared to defy them. It was a warning, subtly woven into threads of divine light. Arachne, on the other hand, chose a more provocative subject. Her tapestry, equally intricate and breathtaking in its detail, depicted the gods less than flattering moments, their deceptions, their infidelities, their many embarrassing indiscretions with mortals. It was a masterpiece of satire, daringly exposing the flaws of the very beings they worshipped. Even Athena could not find a flaw in Arachne's weaving. It was perfect, technically flawless, and artistically brilliant. But its content, its disrespectful portrayal of the Olympians, was a grave insult. Enraged by the mortal's insolence and the unflattering truth of her artistry, Athena struck Arachne's loom, tearing the tapestry to shreds. Arachne, overwhelmed by shame, fear, and despair, attempted to hang herself. But Athena, in a final act of twisted mercy, or perhaps to ensure a perpetual, living punishment, prevented her death. Instead, she transformed Arachne into a spider, condemning her and all her descendants to weave for eternity, spinning threads from their own bodies. You can almost see it, the frantic, delicate movements of Arachne, now a spider, tirelessly spinning her web, an echo of her former artistry, but stripped of all glory and recognition. Her work, once admired by gods and mortals alike, is now the silent, often unnoticed, labor of a small creature. This is a punishment perfectly suited to the crime. Her pride in her weaving led to her downfall, and now her weaving is her eternal prison. It's a chilling reminder that in the presence of the gods, talent is a gift, but humility is a necessity. And never ever draw unflattering caricatures of them, especially if they control your fate, leaving the industrious, albeit tragic, web of Arachne. You are now cast into a scene of chilling transformation, a place where beauty and pride are twisted into monstrous horror. Here, you encounter the figure of Medusa, whose very name has become a byword for petrifying gaze and serpentine hair. Unlike many of the punished, Medusa was not originally known for hubris or defiance against the gods, but rather for her striking beauty. She was one of 3 Gorgon sisters, though unlike her immortal siblings, Stheno and Uriel, Medusa was born mortal. She was famed for her captivating looks, particularly her luxurious, flowing hair, which was said to be as beautiful as any goddess's. Her story, however, takes a dark turn, illustrating that divine wrath can be sparked not just by defiance, but also by unfortunate circumstance and the cruel caprice of the gods themselves. According to one of the most widely accepted versions of her myth, Medusa was a priestess in the temple of Athena, a sacred vow that required her to remain chaste. Her beauty, however, caught the eye of Poseidon, the mighty god of the sea. Whether by force, seduction, or a combination of both, Poseidon violated Medusa within the very precincts of Athena's temple. Now, one might expect Athena, the goddess of wisdom and justice, to direct her wrath at Poseidon, the instigator of this sacrilege. But in a truly perplexing and cruel twist of divine justice, Athena turned her fury upon Medusa, the victim. Perhaps it was a warped sense of upholding the sanctity of her temple, or perhaps it was a grim demonstration of her power and her unforgiving nature towards any perceived slight, even an indirect one. The consequences for Medusa were horrifying and irreversible. You can imagine the scene. Medusa, once admired for her beauty, now recoils in terror as Athena's curse takes hold. Her once beautiful hair begins to writhe, transforming into a mass of venomous snakes, their scales glinting, their forked tongues flicking menacingly. Her skin, once soft and inviting, becomes coarse and scaly. Her face distorts, her features contort into a hideous, terrifying visage. But the most chilling part of the transformation is her gaze. Her eyes, once pools of captivating beauty, become instruments of death. Anyone who looks upon Medusa's transformed face is instantly turned to stone, their flesh solidifying, their life extinguished in a single, horrifying moment. It's a permanent, petrifying curse, turning the very act of being seen into a weapon of destruction. Medusa, the once beautiful priestess, became a monstrous outcast, forced to flee her home and live in isolation, forever guarded by her immortal sisters. Her existence became a living prison, a constant reminder of the horrific injustice inflicted upon her. Every living thing that dared to meet her gaze, whether intentionally or by accident, became a lifeless statue, a testament to her tragic fate. Her story is a grim reminder that divine justice in Greek mythology isn't always fair or logical. Sometimes it's a brutal, disproportionate act of vengeance that punishes the innocent along with, or instead of, the guilty. For Medusa, her beauty was not a blessing but a curse, leading her to a fate far worse than death itself, until her eventual demise at the hands of Perseus, whose shield provided a mirror to reflect her own horrifying power back at her. From Phaeton's fiery descent, you are flung into a scene of exhilarating flight turned catastrophic demise, where a youthful mistake ignites the very heavens. Here, you witness the spectacular, yet tragic, downfall of Phaeton, the ambitious son of Helios, the god of the sun. Phaeton, a mortal, was constantly teased and doubted by his peers, who questioned his divine parentage. Driven by a desperate need to prove himself and silence the doubters, he sought out his father, Helios, and begged for proof of his lineage. Helios, in a moment of paternal pride, and perhaps a touch of divine recklessness, swore by the river Styx an unbreakable oath even for the gods. that he would grant Phaeton any wish. And Phaeton, with the impulsive arrogance of youth, wished for the impossible, to drive the sun chariot across the sky for one day. Imagine the sheer audacity of this request. The sun chariot was no ordinary vehicle. It was a magnificent, fiery contraption drawn by 4 powerful, fire-breathing horses. Its daily journey across the heavens was a meticulously orchestrated cosmic event, vital for the balance of the world, and traditionally guided only by Helios himself, a being of immense strength and divine control. It was, essentially, like asking to borrow the keys to a celestial nuclear reactor. Helios immediately regretted his oath. He tried to dissuade his son, describing the immense power of the horses, the treacherous path through the constellations, and the scorching heat of the sun itself. He warned Phaeton that even Zeus, the king of the gods, could not control those horses. But Phaeton, fueled by youthful pride and a stubborn refusal to back down, insisted. Bound by his unbreakable oath, Helios reluctantly relented, giving his son final, desperate instructions on how to steer the magnificent, fiery steeds. You can almost see the dawn break as Phaeton takes the reins. At first, the horses, sensing a lighter, less experienced hand, bolt from their path. Phaeton, overwhelmed and terrified, quickly loses control. The chariot veers wildly, plummeting too close to the earth, scorching the lands below, drying up rivers, turning fertile plains into deserts, and even blackening the skin of some unfortunate mortals. This is the origin of the Sahara Desert, some myths say, and the dark skin of the Ethiopians. Imagine the chaos, crops withering in an instant, waters evaporating, cities bursting into flame. All because one impetuous teenager decided to go for a joyride. Then, just as abruptly, Phaeton pulls the reins too high, sending the chariot soaring upwards, bringing a deadly chill to the parched earth and threatening to freeze the celestial sphere. The constellations themselves are said to have quivered in fear, and the world cries out in agony and imbalance. Seeing the catastrophic destruction unfolding, and fearing that Phaeton would destroy the entire cosmos, Zeus, with a heavy heart, or at least a heavy hand, had no choice but to intervene. With a flash of his mighty thunderbolt, Zeus struck Phaeton from the chariot. The rash youth plunged headlong from the sky, a flaming meteor falling to his death, landing in the river Eridanus. His sisters, the Heliades, mourned him so deeply that they were transformed into poplar trees, their tears hardening into amber along the riverbanks. Phaeton's punishment wasn't a slow, torturous cycle, but a swift, devastating consequence of his hubris and incompetence. It was a brutal reminder that some powers are reserved for the gods alone, and that even a god's son, when he dares to wield a force beyond his capability, can bring about immense destruction and face an equally swift, fiery end. From Actaeon's tragic demise amidst his own hounds, you are now flung into a quiet, sun-dappled forest, a place of peace that suddenly erupts into horrifying violence. Here, you witness the gruesome fate of Actaeon, a renowned hunter whose punishment came swiftly and mercilessly, not for a grand act of defiance, but for an accidental, fleeting glimpse. Actaeon was a prince of Thebes, a devoted follower of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and childbirth. He was known for his skill with a bow and arrow, his keen eye, and his deep respect for the natural world. He spent his days in the forests, tracking game, and perhaps felt a connection to the wild spirit of his patron goddess. His story takes a sudden, terrifying turn on a particularly hot day. While hunting with his hounds, Actaeon stumbled upon a secluded grotto, a hidden spring where Artemis and her attendant nymphs were bathing. This was no ordinary bath. It was a sacred, private ritual, a moment of divine vulnerability and purity, and Actaeon, by sheer dumb luck, walked right into it. He saw the goddess, unclothed and radiant, surrounded by her nymphs. It was a sight no mortal was ever meant to behold. Now, whether Actaeon lingered to admire her beauty or immediately turned away in terror is a point of contention in the myths. Some say he gazed too long, captivated by the divine form. Others claim it was a purely accidental, fleeting glance, a misfortune of timing and place. Regardless of his intent, The outcome was the same. He had violated the sanctity of Artemis's privacy, a transgression the fiercely chaste and intensely private goddess could not, and would not forgive. Her wrath, unlike the grand, calculated punishments of Zeus, was immediate, visceral, and utterly merciless. You can almost feel the air crackle with her fury. Artemis, outraged by the intrusion, immediately splashed water onto Actaeon's face. But this was no ordinary water. It was imbued with divine power, a transformative agent of her wrath. As the drops touched him, Actaeon began to change. His skin coarsened, his body elongated, antlers sprouted from his head, and his hands and feet became hooves. He tried to speak, to cry out, to plead for mercy, but only the baying of a deer escaped his throat. He was transforming into a stag, the very creature he so often hunted. And the horror didn't stop there. His own hunting hounds, loyal companions who had followed him through countless forests, suddenly caught his scent. But to them, he was no longer their master. He was just another stag, a deer to be pursued and brought down. They did not recognize him. You see them now, a pack of dozens, perhaps even 50, baying and howling, their eyes alight with the thrill of the chase. Actaeon, trapped in his new form, flees in terror, running from the very creatures he had trained, the ones who had loved him. He desperately tries to find refuge, to escape, but they are too many, too swift, too relentless. The chase is short and brutal. His own hounds, with savage ferocity, tear him limb from limb, devouring him in the forest he once roamed as master. It is a profoundly ironic and tragic end. The hunter becomes the hunted, consumed by the very tools of his trade. Actaeon's fate serves as a chilling warning about the dangers of accidentally crossing a god, especially one as private and vengeful as Artemis. His punishment was not about pride in his skill, like Arachne, but about the unintentional violation of divine boundaries, a reminder that even innocent actions can have deadly, irreversible consequences when they trespass upon the sacred. From the unheard cries of Cassandra, you are now transported to the hallowed, yet doomed, city of Troy, where a different kind of divine curse unfolds, one that attacks the very essence of human connection belief. Here, you witness the agonizing fate of Cassandra, a Trojan princess whose gift of prophecy was twisted into a perpetual torment, forcing her to foresee doom but never to be believed. Cassandra was one of the many daughters of King Priam and Queen Hecuba of Troy, and she was said to be extraordinarily beautiful, even among the legendary beauties of her age. Her story is deeply intertwined with the powerful god Apollo, who, in his characteristic manner, became infatuated with her. He desired her, and in exchange for her affections, he offered her the extraordinary gift of prophecy, the ability to see the future with perfect clarity. Imagine such a power. To know what is to come, to understand the intricate tapestry of fate, to see both triumphs and tragedies before they unfold. It's a power that any mortal would crave, a way to navigate life's uncertainties with absolute knowledge. However, Cassandra, despite the allure of the gift, rejected Apollo's advances. She accepted the prophecy but refused to yield to his desires. Now, a slighted Olympian, especially one as proud and vengeful as Apollo, does not take rejection lightly. He could not, or perhaps would not, reclaim his divine gift as once given. Such powers are often irrevocable. So, in a cruel act of vengeance, Apollo cursed Cassandra not by taking away her ability to see the future, but by ensuring that no one, absolutely no one, would ever believe her prophecies. You can almost see it now, Cassandra, her eyes wide with the horrifying clarity of future events, sees the wooden horse at the gates of Troy. She sees the Greek soldiers hidden within. She sees the destruction of her city, the slaughter of her family, the enslavement of her people. She screams, she warns, she pleads with her father, her brothers, the elders of Troy. Her voice is desperate, filled with the certainty of absolute truth. She describes the horrors to come with vivid, undeniable detail, tears streaming down her face. But her words fall on deaf ears. Her family dismisses her as mad. The Trojan people laugh at her, pity her, or simply ignore her frantic warnings. Imagine the frustration, the sheer, maddening despair of seeing the inevitable, of knowing the only path to salvation, and being utterly powerless to convince anyone to listen. It's like watching a cart hurtle towards a cliff, screaming warnings to the driver, but your voice comes out as meaningless babble. This punishment is a profound form of psychological torture. It's the agony of knowledge combined with the agony of powerlessness. Her mind is a perfect mirror of the future, yet her voice is perpetually unheard, her warnings dismissed as the ravings of a lunatic. She sees the doom of Troy, she predicts the suffering of her loved ones, and she is forced to watch it all unfold, exactly as she foretold, unable to alter a single detail, unable to save anyone. Even after the fall of Troy, her curse followed her. She was taken as a war prize by Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, and famously foretold their impending murder upon their return home. And, predictably, she was not believed, leading to their shared bloody end. Cassandra's fate is a chilling illustration of a god's petty yet profound vengeance. A reminder that sometimes the worst punishments aren't about what is done to your body, but what is done to your mind, trapping you in a silent, screaming prison of truth. Leaving the unheard cries of Cassandra, you are now gently placed in a lush, verdant glade, a place of serene beauty that holds a poignant echo of lost sound. Here, you encounter the sorrowful figure of Echo, a nymph whose punishment transformed her vibrant voice into a mere whisper, forever repeating the words of others. Echo was a beautiful and vivacious mountain nymph, beloved by many. However, she had a peculiar habit: she loved to talk. A lot. This garrulous nature, while charming to some, eventually drew the ire of the formidable goddess Hera, wife of Zeus. Zeus, notorious for his many dalliances with nymphs and mortal women, frequently descended from Olympus to pursue his romantic escapades. To avoid Hera's wrath and detection, Zeus would often rely on Echo to distract his suspicious wife. Echo, with her endless chatter and engaging stories, would cleverly detain Hera, keeping her entertained and occupied while Zeus slipped away to meet his latest conquest. Imagine the sheer nerve of using the Queen of the Gods as your personal, unwitting alibi. It's almost comical until Hera inevitably catches on. One day, Hera discovered the deception. Her fury, as you might expect, was boundless. She realized that Echo's ceaseless chatter was not merely an annoying habit, but a deliberate tactic used to aid her philandering husband. Hera, a goddess known for her vengeful nature and her particularly cruel punishments for those who crossed her, especially in matters of Zeus's infidelity, cursed Echo. But her curse was not one of physical pain or eternal labor. It was a punishment of the voice, the very essence of Echo's being. You can almost hear the divine decree ringing through the glade. You, Echo, will never again use your tongue in the way you wish, but only for reply. Of all speech you shall only have the last word. And so Echo's curse took hold. Her once melodious, vibrant voice, capable of weaving long narratives and witty banter, was reduced to a mere echo. She could no longer initiate conversation, express her own thoughts, or tell her own stories. She could only repeat the last words spoken by another, a hollow imitation of true speech. Imagine the profound despair of such a fate. To hear thoughts, to formulate responses, to yearn to communicate, but to be utterly incapable of doing so. To be trapped within yourself, with your own voice betraying your intentions, merely mimicking the sounds around you. It's like being in a constant game of Simon Says, but you're only allowed to repeat says, or trying to write a letter, but only being able to copy the last phrase of the previous sentence. The tragedy of Echo is further compounded by her unrequited love for Narcissus, a beautiful youth who was famously obsessed with his own reflection. When Echo tried to express her love, she could only repeat his words, leading him to misunderstand her and cruelly reject her. Her heart broken, she eventually faded away, wasting to nothing until only her voice remained, forever lingering in caves and valleys, repeating the sounds of the world around her. Echo's fate serves as a poignant reminder of Hera's relentless vengeance and the cruel irony of divine punishment, turning a mortal's defining characteristic into their eternal torment. You have traversed the realms of divine retribution, witnessed the physical and psychological torments meted out by the capricious Greek gods, and now you stand at the precipice of understanding their overarching philosophy of punishment. It's clear by now that justice, in the Olympian sense, is a concept far removed from mortal ideals of fairness or rehabilitation. Instead, it's a terrifying blend of ego, power, and an almost artistic flair for ironic torment. The prevailing theme across these divine retributions is often hubris, that dangerous human flaw of excessive pride or defiance towards the gods. It's a constant, nagging reminder that mortals must know their place, and that place is decidedly beneath the omnipotent, temperamental beings who control the cosmos. Tantalus dared to steal from their table and test their knowledge. Sisyphus, with his cunning, thought he could cheat death and outsmart the deities themselves. Prometheus, in his benevolence, directly defied Zeus's decree and stole his precious fire. Ixion not only murdered but then tried to seduce the queen of the gods. These were not minor offenses, they were direct affronts to divine authority and order. But as we saw with Medusa and Actaeon, punishment wasn't always a direct consequence of intentional malice. Sometimes, it was a horrifyingly disproportionate response to an unfortunate accident, or even a god's personal vendetta. Medusa, a victim of Poseidon's violation, was cruelly transformed by Athena, her beauty becoming a weapon of stone. Actaeon, a mere hunter, was torn apart by his own hounds for an accidental glimpse of Artemis bathing. Phaeton's youthful recklessness, though catastrophic, was a consequence of his father's oath, not direct defiance. These instances highlight the gods' unpredictable nature, where being in the wrong place at the wrong time could be just as fatal as rebellion. It truly was like walking into a room full of highly caffeinated, incredibly attractive, and terminally insecure super beings who also happen to control the very fabric of reality. Another common thread is the element of futility in many of these punishments. Tantalus forever reaches for what he cannot grasp. Sisyphus pushes his rock in an endless, pointless cycle. The Danaides eternally fill a leaky jar. This isn't just about inflicting pain, it's about crushing hope, breaking the spirit, and rendering all effort meaningless. The gods understood that the agony of perpetual, unfulfilled labor could be far more insidious than a single finite torment. It's the ultimate cosmic mic drop, where the divine says, "You think you're clever. Let's see you be clever when your entire existence is a punchline." The choice of punishment often perfectly mirrored the crime, a grim form of poetic justice. Midas's greed led to his gilded cage, unable to consume or embrace. Arachne's pride in her weaving led to her becoming a spider, forever weaving, but without glory. Echo's garrulous nature was silenced, leaving her only to repeat. This tailored torment ensures that the very thing a mortal valued or misused becomes the instrument of their eternal suffering. It's a rather elegant, if terrifying, system of divine accountability. These stories weren't just tales, they were cautionary fables embedded in the very fabric of ancient Greek society. They reinforced the power of the gods, instilled a healthy or perhaps unhealthy fear of divine wrath, and subtly, or not so subtly, encouraged adherence to the established order. They taught humility, caution, and the ultimate futility of trying to outmaneuver immortal beings.